Hey, Travis, I bet I'm in a more fun place than you are right now.
I have no doubt that you're in a more fun place than I am. I'm in a very messy office, but I will say, even though it's hazy back here, I
Yeah,
have I have new bookshelves.
I don't believe it because I can't see it. It was that busted piece of crap bookshelf that you had, and you're pointing at this blur, and I don't see a thing. So
Well, if you recall, the blur is darker than in past times.
okay.
I don't want to show my office because it's an embarrassment. It is a wreck right now.
Well,
I feel
I
like
am.
our lives have been wrecked this past week.
Yeah, I am in a trailer on vacation again near Salt Lake City, and it's really stunningly beautiful here. So, um, yeah, this was a tough week. First of all, welcome to Notes On with Travis and Ross. This is the show where we try to do Christ on purpose and talk about anything that uh, grabs us about our Christian faith. And Travis, about an hour and a half ago, I called you and I said I had a weird request of what I wanted to do on the show. I said I wanted to talk about Jimmy Buffett passing. And you and I have been friends for years, and you said, "Well, of course we got to talk about that because I loved him, and I didn't know, I didn't know." So
Yeah, I've always loved him, and my college sweetheart was a huge Jimmy Buffett fan. So when she and I were hanging out, we were either listening to Bob Marley or Jimmy Buffett. And she actually took me to the only concert that I've ever been to of Jimmy Buffett. I was, I guess I was a junior in college. So saw him in Cincinnati back in 92, I think 92. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a really emotional thing for me.
Yeah.
I might kind of lose it on this show. I mean, he released the album that's got Margaritaville on it in '77, so I was 21, and I listened to that album, and it just grabbed a hold of me. And I went backwards. I went and bought A1A and his earlier stuff that I hadn't heard yet, and I realized this guy speaks to me more than anybody else. I mean, in the '70s and '80s, when I was single, I living in LA, I saw every concert that came through town, everybody that was big in those years. But Jimmy Buffett was my guy. Every time he came in town, I saw him. I probably honestly saw him a dozen times.
Wow.
Yeah, including about 6 years ago, he played the Hollywood Bowl, which was a maniacal, wonderful time. 17,000 people under the stars in the summer watching Jimmy Buffett with, fruit on their heads.
I know he probably played a lot of indoor venues, but I saw him outside too. The one time I saw him, and most of the concert footage that I see of him is always outside.
Yeah,
you can hardly imagine a Jimmy Buffett concert taking place inside. It's almost like he was chosen to only do outside venues.
So I'll tell you, the coolest venue though wasn't the Hollywood Bowl.
Oh.
He did a show that I went and saw. I drove all the way down to San Diego, and they set up chairs on the marina at the yacht club, and he was on, right next to the water. So the seats were facing him, but then all the boats came in behind him because they realized it was Jimmy Buffett, right? And so there's all these boats trying to get as close as they can to the back side of the stage. And of course, they're all getting hammered and having a great time. But I'll never forget that. That was so much fun. And there's something about the way he did his lyrics. I always related to the stories. And, I could be really melancholy and terribly grateful all at the same time. This is a real loss for me. I really, really love that guy and his music.
I did too.
So over the years, I would listen to his music, and he's done 30 albums. Can you imagine doing 30 records?
Yeah, it's incredible.
And he wrote like 8 books, and he acted, and anyway, I probably have 25 of them. And I used to just consume them. I would buy them when they came out, and I was one of those geeks that would not just listen to the music, but open up the album or the CD and memorize all the lyrics. So I knew a lot of his lines, and I would even just think about, how did he think of that line? He was so clever with his words. And before he passed away, it was easy to dismiss him because he didn't fit into any categories, and it was just sort of this lightweight, beach music. But he was really his own category, and he really had some clever, deep lyrics. And I even would talk to the Lord about it. It's like, he had some pretty trashy songs. He has one song called "My Head Hurts, My Feet Stink, and I Don't Love Jesus." But those songs spoke to me so much that I just, I worked it out with God that I can listen to this stuff and not the ones that I didn't like. And how do you do that, Travis? Do you talk to the Lord about stuff like that with music or any kind of art, or where do you go with that?
Well, I mean, I wrestled with it as a young Christian. When I was young, I heard those sermons that basically said rock and roll music is of the devil, and and all of that. And as I read through the scriptures, I began to realize, when it comes to morality, what the scriptures do not condemn, we are allowed to do. Now, there's some things that are not wise, and there's some things that are wise. One of my all-time favorite bands is Van Halen.
Yeah.
So you can imagine that there's some songs that I don't really jive with, but that doesn't change the fact that most of their stuff is just fun. And so I wouldn't take it into church, because I also follow the regular principle. So when it comes to worship, whatever the Bible does not actually mandate, I'm not allowed to participate in when it comes to worship. And so I've always felt uncomfortable with people that want to broaden the moral categories to condemn anything that is not explicitly mandated in Scripture when it comes to ethical living. And so I don't really wrestle with it. I use discernment like within anything. But, I have a library full of books that are anti-Christian. And I read those, and I even benefit from those.
Yeah.
Because it's not like every single thing a non-Christian writer is going to say is false. You have to try really hard to write a book that is wholly false. I mean, just by mistake, you're going to say some things that are true. In the same way, you have to really try hard to write a song or play a song that is wholly unredeemable. You have to actually try to. And I guarantee, and I haven't studied the lyrics of the "I Love Jesus" tune that you just cited.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling, and again, I'm not trying to say that Jimmy Buffett was in fact a Christian, but I would bet that what he's really getting at are the kinds of people that say they love Jesus.
Yeah, it was.
And that's really what he doesn't love, because some of the people that say they love Jesus, are unlovable in the basic common sense way that I'm speaking of. I mean, in a sense, we're all unlovable, right? But I don't. I certainly don't want to condemn those lyrics unless I first read them, study them, and so forth. I'm not condoning them. I'm not condemning them, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say maybe he meant something by that on the surface isn't capturing how people are receiving it.
Yeah. So. For me, it's a real struggle with artists that I love, and I'm just, pushed to the ground by their music or art or whatever. And yet, they never came to terms with God or even rejected God. And how do you live with those both those sides? And I guess I just do. I just live with both of them. I know Jimmy Buffett was an altar boy in the Catholic Church, and he rejected that. He's got one line where he says, "I'd rather live while I'm dying than die while I'm living, or something like that, than live when I'm dead. Yeah. And I know he was sick for a while, and I just pray that he came to terms, that he came back.
Sure. Well, I mean, look, this is part of the problem. I mean, some people's church experience wreaks havoc on their faith. Joe Rogan, I just saw a clip of his not long ago where, he wants nothing to do with the Catholic faith because of the way the nuns treated him at school.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have friends that are Catholic that would be the first to condemn what those nuns did to him. But that doesn't change the fact that he had these horrible experiences. And you and I can probably count an item almost. It would seem like the people in evangelical churches that have had such horrible experiences with the people there, they want nothing to do with Christianity. And so the fact that Jimmy Buffett had that Catholic upbringing, I guarantee you he could tell us nightmare stories about his time in school.
Sure.
Incidentally, I've never read one of his books. Have you read his books?
Yeah, I read Who Was Joe Merchant, and there was one other which was really good too. He's as good a writer as he is a song writer, but I don't remember much religious stuff. I read it when he first came out, and I don't remember much about it other than I liked it.
Well, I mean, again, my favorite artist of all time is Bob Marley. Well, he spent his life praising Rastafari Makonnen, the Emperor of Ethiopia, as the promised Messiah.
Yeah.
Now, there's evidence that he became a Christian near the end of his life, but his music does not praise Christ. His music praises someone else. But that doesn't mean that his songs are wholly unredeemable. He has a lot of good things to say about the plight of the poor, the plight of those who are downtrodden. And there's so many Jimmy Buffett songs that I find to be full of truth that I've had to meditate on it multiple times, meditate on them multiple times.
Yeah, there's a lot of Christian ideas in his songs while he rejected Christianity. Isn't that kind of typical of,
Well, I don't know if I might give you pushback there. I don't know if I've heard any Christian lyrics. I can say that there's a lot of good natural theology in there.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
And a lot of the best theological tunes that I know of are rock and roll songs. As I was telling you before we got on the air, I tell my students all the time that one of my favorite theologians is Jimmy Buffett, who has often said, has that great line, "If we couldn't laugh, we'd all go insane." That's the changes in latitudes.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's so many of it. In fact, I actually like his version of Brown Eyed Girl better than Van Morrison's.
Yes. Oh, that was so good. Yeah. He ended one of his albums with it, I remember. And yeah.
And I know that, you and I are probably blaspheming in the eyes of many, but I think it's just a better take on the song. As rare, much as I love Van Morrison's.
It's rare that somebody does a better version than the first.
Yeah.
But yeah, Bob Seger's "Love the One You're With" is the best version of that.
Yeah.
That song. Anyway, so this brings up an interesting question, Travis. I kind of lead with my brain, right? I think about stuff all the time, constantly got 18 things in my head between my job and my studies, just studying theology. And yet I'm a really deep feeling person, and I love art. I love music. I love going to the museum. And, as a Christian, how do we relate to art when the artist was, indifferent or even anti God? It's, again, I've kind of come to terms with it. It's like I can enjoy it because it's beautiful, and God made beauty. And
it's impossible for it's impossible for a human being not to engage in philosophy. It's
right.
impossible for a human being not to do metaphysics. Metaphysics is it's an undeniable practice that we all engage in, because the minute you start saying, well, metaphysics is dead, that's a metaphysical statement. So it's self-defeating to not engage in metaphysics.
Right.
And it's impossible for someone made in God's image not to manifest the image of God that's in them. The image of God has not been erased in any of us. Take the most vile, God-hating person you meet. That person will exude the image of God in some way. So our friends, I want to call them friends, in anti-Christian YouTube channels, they can't help but exude the image of God. And so when they hold Christians' feet to the fire and say, what you believe must be rational, they are expressing a deep-seated knowledge of God. And they're right to hold our feet to the fire and say, what you believe must be rational. They have the right to do that.
Aren't there lots of times in the Bible where the Israelites or the Christians in the New Testament were challenged appropriately by people outside the faith? It's one of those ironies.
Absolutely.
That keeps us humble.
There are two approaches to theology. One is right and one is wrong. The one that's wrong is syncretism, where you basically just pile all these ideas in a kind of a syncretistic stew, and then you extract whatever has been built from that. The correct method is synthesis, where you have the truth as revealed in Scripture and in nature, and you synthesize the ideas that you're getting from both. And Augustine said that all truth meets at the top. It's all found in God. So if anybody says something that is true, then they are speaking God's truth, because God is the author of all truth. And beauty is also a transcendental in classical theology. So if you create something that is beautiful, you are creating something that is godlike. If it is beautiful, it is godlike.
Yeah.
And so as a manifestation of God's image, as image bearers, we're going to be creative. We're going to make things that are beautiful. And it doesn't matter if you're a Christian or non-Christian. And so, again, fundies who get mad at Christians for looking at non-Christian art, they're just way out of line, because first of all, Christian art is often horrible. I mean, one of the worst forms of music out there, I'm going to say this out loud, is Christian music.
Oh, I'm with you.
I mean, evangelical praise music is at an all-time low. If you want something beautiful, read the lyrics to the old hymns. Or go to worship service and listen to those songs. I'm talking about classical Christian songs, and some of the new stuff is done very well.
Or the old bluegrass stuff. Like, you ever heard of a group called Blind Boys of Alabama?
I've heard of them, yes.
They were a black group that rotated people in and out, and it was just this amazing gospel. For music, for my money, the gospel music of the early 20th century is the best Christian music, that you would call contemporary, I guess.
But it's so good on levels. The lyrics are deep, and the music is good, and these singers are not using auto-tune.
Yeah.
They're just, it's just talent all the way down and all the way up, through and through.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Buffett was just a natural talent. He was just and he was brilliant. I mean, you just said it, 30 albums. Was it 8 books? Did you say earlier?
Yeah.
I mean, that right there is a career. And then, of course, he was an entrepreneur, opened all these restaurants, and
Travis, he was worth $1 billion when he passed.
Yeah,
because he just, I mean, I'm blown away by that almost as much as the fact that he made all those records, because he was a really good businessman. He was really shrewd, and I just I really admire that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the guy, and he was full of life, very successful. One of my favorite songs that he sang was Lola and Frankie.
I
Have you
remember
remember that song?
That's
Lola loves Frankie. Frankie loves Lola on their second honeymoon in
in
Pensacola.
Pensacola. That's
Trying,
way one of the early albums. Yeah.
trying to find a little privacy. I love that song. I also love I love the Jolly Man that he sang for his daughter.
Oh
The
yeah.
Jolly Man Sing.
Yeah.
Has a kind of reggae vibe to it because I love reggae. He did combine a lot of genres. There was a country and rock and calypso vibe to his songs that I thought was, I mean, he just really did a good job. He was just so talented and versatile. He could bring these different types of music together.
You know what? I'll tell you a funny story. You and I both know Mark Perez, you know, our friend who works for Reasons to Believe now. And I was all excited about a Jimmy Buffett song, you know, and he was asking me what music he should listen to because he's not a music guy, right? So I said, you got to listen to Jimmy Buffett. And he came back to me and he said, that music makes me want to put a gun to my head.
Really?
Yeah, because it's so melancholy. He said, I need upbeat music. And I said, oh, man.
No, I never thought. I mean, now look, he has songs that, I mean, come Monday, I mean, this is we're filming this on Labor Day. And that's a quintessential Labor Day song.
Yep.
And that has a sadness to it.
They're very, I just love that melancholy, grateful to be alive feeling that happens at the same time. And I wrote down a few of my favorite songs. I just wanted to tell the audience, and they're not the ones that, you know, the popular ones. They're the ones that you got to go look for. I think Pirate Looks at 40 is probably,
that's my favorite song.
My favorite song. He's got this one great line in there. You know, the whole song's about how he wanted to be a pirate and it's all too late. And he says, my occupational hazard's been, my occupation's just not around. And what a great line. I mean, how do you think of that?
Well, I'm going to say something to you that's going to make you jealous.
You know, this will be twice now. Okay.
Well, I mean, you know, I went on a boat trip a few years ago with a friend of mine. Took me on this boat trip, and the captain of that trip is the inspiration for the song "A Pirate Looks at 40." And his name, the guy's name was Joe.
Wow, that's cool.
The captain's name was Joe, and so we went are the places that Jimmy Buffett hung out at. So he spent a lot of time in Key West, for example. And so he just knew he was a sailor. He was a genuine sailor. He was always on the sea. Yeah.
Yeah. So another one, he's got one called Bama Breeze about a bar in Alabama that closed. It's a great song. I think maybe my second favorite is He Went to Paris.
Great song.
Real early in his career about, you know, he's all ambitious and wants to get stuff done and winds up in Paris, and 20 years later, you know, he's still in Paris eating cheese and enjoying
the best version of that song is a live version in Paris.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I've got to check that out. He's got another song called Gypsies in the Palace, which is a lot of fun.
So my friend that took me on the boat trip, my friend and I were riding around one time, and he was on like he was just listening to a radio, I guess a Spotify channel, or I'm old school. I get CDs still and listen to the lyrics on the flap jacket and all that stuff. So, but he and I were listening, and I heard the pirate. He Went to Paris. I heard that He Went to Paris, and the live recording in Paris, and it was fantastic.
Yeah. So back to this art thing, I think any music can be worship music if you turn to God when you're listening to it. And I think that's what Jimmy Buffett's music taught me. You know, over the years, it was like I would listen to some of his songs and I would just say, thank you, Jesus, for that song. That song is so beautiful to me. And, you know, this is something I've learned in my, you know, I've been on this prayer crusade praying. I've gotten to where I not only pray for people and I thank God for things in my life, but then I find that I'm thanking God for those people. Like I realize those people, they're people, but they're also a gift from God to me because they're in my life. You included. And I think, thank you, Lord, for Jimmy Buffett. Thank you for his music, what he's done for my heart, and I guess I just want to say to people, don't, as Christians, it's okay to deeply, deeply feel about this stuff. Go find whatever that art is that grabs your gut, and wrenches it out on the floor, and just enjoy it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's an anti-intellectual fundamentalist mentality that I think
Yeah.
our appreciation of life, it's don't drink, don't chew, don't go out with girls that do, and then don't listen to rock and roll music or don't listen to certain types of music.
Yeah.
And it really is silly. And some of the people that posture themselves as very much in line with the Lord, it's eye-opening to realize that the theology they're promoting is really not that biblical.
Mm-hmm. And it's a lot, and it's no fun.
We're a straight state.
Yeah.
Right. You're basically just a sourpuss. You're walking around you look like you're constantly sucking on a lemon, and I think that's what Jimmy Buffett was singing against. He was singing not against, again, I'm not saying he was a Christian. I mean, and that doesn't, on one level, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, obviously I want everybody to be Christians because I think Christianity is true, but I don't, that's not what, I don't ask the question, is this person a Christian? And until I get a yes answer, I'm not going to hold them at abeyance.
Yeah.
I just don't believe in doing that to people. That's just, it's dismissive. And I wouldn't want to be done. I don't want that to be done to me.
I'm kind of nuanced on that. I do wonder if they're a Christian, but then I go ahead and enjoy the music anyway and pray for them.
That's fair.
But I do care. It matters to me. I really hope I see Jimmy Buffett, in heaven. So
yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with you. I guess I'm speaking on a different level there. I'm not trying to make a comment about his soul or anything. I'm simply saying that I'm not going to let the fact that he's not a Christian keep me from listening to his music or hearing what he has to offer. Because I'm sure he has. I mean, we know Jimmy Buffett had a lot to offer. And there's so many other non-Christians out there that have so much to offer.
Yeah. We're just in humbleness in Christ, we try to enjoy. It's okay to fully, fully, fully enjoy the things of the world if we do it in him. If he's right there with us. That's how I see it.
And we can't avoid him being there with us.
That's right. We can ignore him. We can pretend like he's not there. Yeah.
But you can't avoid him. I mean, Charles Spurgeon loved to smoke cigars. And he heard a preacher preach a sermon against cigar smoking one time.
Uh-huh.
And when the sermon was over, he walked up to the preacher and he pulled a cigar out of his pocket. I'm going to walk outside and smoke this to the glory of God.
That's right. That's it. Well, Travis, I think you've got one. Can you hear me?
You for just a second.
Okay. You're there now.
Hey, you know what? We were planning on playing a Jimmy Buffett song.
Yeah.
But I fear that our technical difficulties will prevent it from being played in a coherent manner. And I think Gene, our producer, is going to have a hard time. Why don't we make a deal that the last 5 minutes of our show next week, we will end with a Jimmy Buffett song?
Yeah, we can make this. We can run this into 2 shows. I'm going to recommend one more song. I keep thinking this is my favorite. This is my favorite. He's got one of his most underrated albums is Barometer Soup, which is the cover song is just a really wonderful, complicated sort of calypso beat. But he's got a song on that album called Remittance Man. And it's just this really sad story about this guy who's comes from a really wealthy family, but he's the black sheep of the family. And the way that the family decides to get rid of him is they send him they wire him money, but to a different port every month. So he's got to just spend his life running around the world, collecting the money that they send him, and he's so busy traveling that he doesn't have chance to get into any trouble. And I guess it's on the liner notes. Jimmy Buffett said it's based on a Mark Twain story, and I haven't been able to find it. I tried to find it one day, and I don't know if it's part of a bigger novel, but I'd love to know if anybody knows what that's from. But it's just the whole thought of it, like, he's probably on the greatest cruise ships and the trains and eating the finest food, but he can never settle down. He can never stop anywhere and get into any trouble because he just has to keep moving, to collect the remittance. What a great, it's just very sad.
Yeah, he was a voracious reader. In fact, my brother-in-law was in Florida, and I think it was The Prince of Tides. He was at that movie, and when he went to the bathroom, standing next to him at the urinal was Jimmy Buffett. and Jimmy Buffett said, they just how guys do sometimes. You just sort of start talking at the urinal, and Jimmy Buffett just started talking. He goes, well, the book is better. Started talking about the book and all of that. So, and my brother-in-law talked about it. But it was just interesting how Jimmy Buffett just immediately goes into dissecting the movie, critiquing it, talking about how the book is better, etc.
That's funny. I met Lee Strobel in a restroom once.
On The Prince of Tides, just to fan, and he quotes lines from the book itself. So, just so I have these 2 little stories. My brother-in-law who met Jimmy Buffett, and then a friend of mine, or a guy who I met who's the inspiration for A Pirate Looks at 40.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
But we have a lot of splotches in this feed. I hope our producer is able to put together a coherent video. We apologize to all of you for the glitches, but we're going to talk about Christian art next week again, because I think it's an important topic. And I have a radio show at Pretoria Fields Radio, and I'm doing a 2-hour tribute to Jimmy Buffett on Friday night from 6 to 8.
Wow.
And I'm inviting you, Ross, if you want to call in and listen, and maybe even give your 2 cents worth. I'm going to try to get some of our other DJs to join me in the show.
I would love that. I'll give you some recommendations on my favorite kind of hidden gems of his songs. That
absolutely, and we'll
knows.
Try to play every one of them. Just 2 hours of us just playing Jimmy Buffett music and talking about what he meant to us.
I wish I was out there with you. I'd love to be in studio.
Yeah. Well, I love you, man. Take care. Let's pick this up next week, and maybe we can have at least a less technically challenging show.
Love you, Travis. It's fun to do this.
Case in point, we couldn't even close out. Let's hook up next week and try to have a less technically challenging show.
Let's do that. All right, man.
Take care.
I'll call you from Montana next week.